Welcome back to the Backcountry Manifesto podcast, brought to you by the good folks at Sharedport. I'm your buddy out west, Hayden Samak, and today on the show, we have our very first return guest, Mr. John Long. He is on the show on the 50th anniversary of the first single-day ascent of El Cap that he undertook with his buddies Billy Westbay and Jim Bridwell on Memorial Day, 1975. Today, he's going to tell us all about it, and you might not recognize this as our normal recording setup. It's not. We are at the Yosemite Climbing Museum, put together by the Yosemite Climbing Association. Our buddy Ken let us in here. It's a member-supported museum. We're going to take you for a quick tour around it towards the end of this. But yeah, couldn't be a better place. John, thanks for...
Yeah. You want me to just break down like how it all came about and how it went?
Oh, hell yeah, man. But, first, if you guys haven't watched Stonemasters Part 1 and 2, you should check it out. But, John, can you give them like a 2-minute thing about the Stonemasters and the climbing scene? I know it's not really a 2-minute thing.
Yeah, the golden age of Yosemite, basically, first ascent of Half Dome in 1957, up through, well, it is equivocal, but probably Robin's solo ascent of El Cap, the mirror wall in El Cap, 1968. Probably those 11, 12 years, those are considered to be the golden years in Yosemite, where the big route, the original big routes up the big iconic formations that were made famous by Ansel Adams photography.
Like what?
Half Dome, El Capitan, Leaning Tower, different things up Middle Cathedral, Yellow Wall, the Rostrum. There's all kinds of different, south face of the column. There's all kinds of different formations. And the first climbs that went up these great iconic, formations that Ansel Adams made famous with all his pictures and postcards and all the rest of it. And that's part of the American culture, those pictures of those formations. And Yosemite is the crown jewel of the American park system. So the Golden Age climbers were the first to climb some of the most iconic formations in America, basically, whatever it is. Those are, El Capitan is just, it's one of the most famous sort of natural kind of things in America. It has to be. Anybody that's ever seen it is.
It's wild.
Yeah, it's 3,000 feet of granite that rises right out of the talus, as steep as skyscrapers off Billionaires Row in Manhattan.
And you climbed that as part of a group that kind of originated from your friend group, because you grew up climbing Joshua Tree first.
Joshua Tree, Suicide, and Talk Eats Rock.
Y'all got
the Yosemite pioneers, a lot of them, Roy Robbins, Tom Frost, Von Chenard, T.M. Herbert, they all came out of Talk Eats, which is Talk Eats Rock was one of the local areas above Palm Springs where I grew up. And so we sort of came out of the same mold, but we're a generation or two later than the Yosemite pioneers.
Sure. And you kind of migrated sort of together and built a scene in Yosemite, and that, I guess if rock climbing has popular culture, right? Stonemasters.
Yeah.
Is it fair?
That was our group. I mean, the thing was different. The original group came out of deep ecology and backpacking and wilderness travel and mountaineering and all of that stuff, right? And our group came out of surfing, rock and roll, and athletics. Everybody in the original Stonemaster group from Southern California was like a regular, like a track and field or water polo or baseball or they came out of regular athletics and were involved in that from really early age, and most of them were really high performers in that, and they just transitioned into rock climbing. They met each other, and there was a certain synergy with it, and there's a lot of opportunity to do new things, and voila, you had the Stonemasters.
Okay, so that's who the Stonemasters were. Basically a Lords of Dogtown equivalent in the climbing scene, kind of?
Yeah, Lords of Dogtown weren't people that segued out of regular athletics. That was the sort of the footnote of the Stonemasters. They just switched sports.
Right.
Right?
Because in part one, you talk about Rick Akamozo being a beast of a water polo player.
Yeah, an all-American water polo player, and Mike Graham was a great surfer, and Backer was a former, pole vaulter, and yada yada, all the way down the line was people who were involved in regular sports.
Gotcha. Okay,
So they had a sport like they knew about discipline and how to train for things, all of that.
So it allowed them to approach this with a certain level of focus.
Yeah, and the other thing was the popularity of climbing, like it doubled or tripled in just a matter of a couple of years around the early 70s, and our generation, just like every generation that followed us, were able to do a lot more climbing than the previous generations. So we were bouldering all the time and going out to Joshua Tree whenever we could, and then spending 90 days, basically every free day in summer vacation I'd spend up here. And so people, our generation were climbing 250 or 300 days a year, and that was brand new. And sports a lot of times are just performances based on how many reps you get in, right? And we got in more reps than everybody. So, amongst our group, there are some very talented athletes, and you put that many reps in, and you had a lot of ambition, and you have a place like Yosemite where there's untold or unlimited amount of potential for doing new things. And I mean, you have a perfect condition for a perfect mix to have a sort of a revolutionary kind of movement.
Okay. Now that we kind of have the stonemasters pinned down as much as one can have the stonemasters pinned down, right? What I'd like to talk about is the two other stonemasters that accompanied you, or you accompanied them, whatever. It was a mutual accompaniment. I understand that. Was it Bridwell that put the team together?
Yeah, the background on the first one day Ascent of the Nose was a couple things. One, Bridwell, Jim Bridwell, who was a mentor of mine and Billy Westbay and a bunch of other people, he's a generation 10 years ahead of us. He was like probably the most accomplished American rock climber at the time. He sort of took over the mantle from Royal Robbins. And, he's got like most of the Yosemite climbers back then would like to at least consider themselves to be the most badass climbers on the planet. But that crown was held by Reinhold Messner, who was doing all this wild out, soloing Everest without oxygen, bottle oxygen, all that other stuff. And there was a very famous shot of him and Habler having just speed climbed the north face of the Eiger. And what the heck was it? It was a cover shot from Mountain Magazine, and they were there with all their gear standing in front of the Eiger, like heroes. And Bridwell didn't like the fact that he wasn't on the cover, right? Oh, really? Yeah. He's like, hey, man, that should be us, not them. And so he had to come up with something that was going to be like, he goes, never mind, climbing the Eiger, that was done in the 30s. We got to do something better. And the thing to do would be try to climb El Capitan in a day. Several people had tried to do it over the previous couple of years, and it was sort of a benchmark on how efficient we could be doing something that up until then was most people would take 2, 3, 4 days to do. So,
and when you say most people, you don't mean most people. You mean most elite climbers.
Yeah, there were very few climbers actually climbing El Cap. During the summertime, we could go down and see 1 or 2 parties maybe up on El Cap at any given time. But there was only dozens or so of ascents every summer back in those days. So, trying to climb that thing in a day, as it turned out, relative to where we were technically, it wasn't all that hard. Like it was a given. At least I considered it a given before I even started it. And that's how it went. Still a great adventure. You don't know how things are going to go. And nobody had ever tried to do it in the way that we did it. So yeah, it was a fantastic thing to do, and I was glad to have a part of it. But as far as it being something that technically at that time for us was unthinkable, it wasn't that at all.
No, I mean, you thought of it, right?
Well, by the time we did that, I was going out to Joshua Tree on a regular basis, a practice climbing area in Southern California, and climbing 40 or 50 routes a day.
Yeah.
So used to doing massive amounts of climbing in a day, hard stuff, and translating it onto El Capitan, which I already climbed a bunch of times by then. It was just the next thing you did, and we did it. But it stood out. The first one day of El Capitan stood out as a historic event because it was a threshold that needed to be passed, and as soon as it was, El Capitan was a different kind of animal. It was looked at differently.
Sure. Tell me about Billy Westbay, because a lot of people, at least in the climbing community, right? They know you, they know Bridwell.
Yeah.
I don't really feel like
Westbay was a prodigy talent from Colorado, and he was one of the guys, sort of the last of the. There's a couple other people in our group, like Dale Bard, and pretty much just Dale and Mark Chapman to some extent. But Westbay was one of the guys that could do all styles, including hard artificial climbing and big wall climbing and all that. White cracks, face climbing, thin crack, whatever it is, he was a technical, like, maestro. He could do anything. And he was also super fast and real efficient and very ambitious. So he was a perfect partner to have to do this sort of more intricate technical stuff in the middle part of the nose. So he was a natural. He was also a friend of Bridwell's, and so he was a natural guy to invite along on the attempt.
I think that you're known for having a certain type of personality. I think Jim Bridwell.
Loud and obnoxious.
No,
yeah, pretty much.
No, loud and authoritative and stately and
ridiculous.
No, it's not. But Jim Bridwell has a reputation for being like, and we talked about this too in part one, like people thought Bridwell was a nut, and like in some ways, I guess if you're trying to do that in a single day, you are a nut, but like he wasn't quite the nut that some people thought him to be.
You don't do as many things as he did worldwide,
just being
a nut.
Yeah.
Right. He was different, and he was dedicated to things that didn't generate a lot of money. So from that, perspective, maybe you could look on as an outlier. But he was a very calculated, knowledgeable guy that was very sober and sane in the way that he went about his business. And, his stuff is, Bridwell did an unbelievable amount of fantastic historical things.
Oh, sure. On a personal level, what was Billy Westbay like?
He was a bro, man. He was a terrific, guy, very supportive, and he had a heart of gold, and he was also big on adventure. Anything that was exciting, man, Billy wanted a piece of it. And he was a solid guy to have along. He wasn't going to, crap out on you or freak out or, just a great partner.
Yeah.
And he pushed it too. Billy and I were always really competitive in a friendly way. And it really helped both of us.
Okay. So those are the characters, right? You, Jim Bridwell, Billy Westbay. You have conceived this plan to do El Cap in a single day, which at that point, even the most elite climbers, 3-4 days, Before we get to this ascent in 1975, I want to talk about the first ever contiguous ascent El Cap, which is Warren Harding, not the president, just named after a president in a kind of
1958 that finished it.
How long did that take?
The best of my memory is Harding wanted to get on the first ascent of the northwest face of Half Dome, which is the first legit big wall. It wasn't really, I think, the Spec Salothe was, which was done in 1950. I would consider that to be the first Yosemite big wall climb. But Half Dome was a step up. It was recognized, it's north face of Half Dome. That's a true big wall, right? And the first ascent of that was done in 1957. Harding wanted to be a part of that, but he wasn't invited along. So he got, having been horned out of that one, he wanted the next best thing to do the second big wall. And instead of Half Dome, he was going to do the big wall of big walls, which was El Cap, which is another big step up from doing Half Dome. And he picked the most stately line, which is right up the north, the south buttress goes up. The two planes of rock converge at a buttress, and the nose goes right up. It forms sort of a nose because it sticks out like that. So his route went right up from the bottom to the top. They have to invent a lot of the techniques, hauling and jumaring, or they didn't even have jumars, but seconding a rope on that's already been led, a pitch that's already been led. So how do you get up the rope instead of climbing the rock? It's with the Prusik knots, and there's a whole bunch of different, how do you bivouac up there? What gear do you have? What do you eat? How do you haul water? All of those things were basically had to be invented on the spot, right? And then the equipment that they had wasn't sufficient to be able, like the pitons they had weren't wide enough for a lot of the wide cracks up there. And the technique of that era and the boots and, yada, yada, it wasn't realistic to think about free climbing much of that stuff, just climbing a thing by virtue of hands and feet, where you had the rope as a backup in case you fell. You're going to have to hammer your way up on this thing, body length at a time, stepping in nylon rungs called aid slings, and basically nail your way up this thing, bottom to top. Very slow going. Once again, had to invent a lot of the equipment and the techniques as they went. And if I'm not mistaken, Kenny might correct me on this, but I think it was 16 months overall, or something right in there that they spent on many different attempts trying to, they're fixing ropes. Right. So they'd go up and get a high point and then descend, but leave the ropes there. So the next time they would go to the top of their ropes and do a little bit more climbing and then descend the ropes. And anyway, I have no idea how many attempts, are probably at least a dozen over a 16-month period. Then the last time, I believe they were up there for 11 days. So you got 47 days total on the wall over a period of 16 or 17 months.
The last one being?
Last one being 12 days.
Gotcha. A
single push bottom to top, and Harding topped out, nailed a bolt ladder all night long to get to the top on the morning of the 12th day.
Wow.
Yeah. And so that became the most iconic route in Yosemite, and over the years, or the decades or whatever, has become the most sought after rock climb in the world by a pretty large margin.
So Memorial Day, or the days leading up to Memorial Day 1975. Lay it out, man. Tell me the story.
Not much. I just tried to stay real active. We did 75 was a sort of banner year for establishing new standards. And when we free climbed the east face of Washington Column and did a bunch of other big, long, things, and highball bouldering started happening. Bridwell, Westbay, and two other guys did the Pacific Ocean Wall, first ascent of that, which was a first sort of super aid climb, and then, speed climbing, which is the nose. And we just stayed active until it happened. We had a plan, got our gear together. Bridwell had a girlfriend who had a place in Yosemite West, a little cabin she gave us. Went over there, ate dinner, fell asleep for a couple hours, got up at 12:30 or something, cooked breakfast, drove down there, hiked up there, and started at 3:30. And I had the first leg of the thing, and I led from the bottom to about a little bit less than halfway up to the top of the boot flake, and that was mostly free climbing, and that was sort of my thing. I could free climb cracks real well, real fast. So I got us up there to the top of the boot by about 7:15 in the morning, and then Westbay took over, led the intricate middle pitch up to beyond the Great Roof up to Camp 5, and then Brittle nailed us out, home, took us home. And that was really it. It was pretty uneventful, and we were at the time, because we're not used to going that fast, right? No brakes, no whatever. Everything sort of blended together. All of us had only done the route once before, so we didn't have it really dialed or rehearsed or whatever. So it seemed sort of new in a sense. So I'd been up there once and did it, but the time that I had done it before, we did it in like a day and a quarter with Ron Fawcett, another English guy, 2 years before when I was really a kid. I think I just turned 18 or something, and I didn't really remember much of it from then either. Right? I don't remember bits and bits, pieces of it, especially towards the top, because we got to the top right at 15 hours with just enough daylight. We started at 3:30 and we got to the top at 6:30, and right there in there. Had just enough time to be able to go down the east ledges and got down to the ground right when it turned dark. So it was a sort of a perfect kind of thing.
What, do you remember what you were thinking as you were approaching the wall? Was there any this is going to be like a nutty thing? Was it just like you said, a total giving?
I was climbing with Bridwell a lot back then, and he got us to understand, okay, there are historic things that happen in Yosemite. This is one of them, and we knew when we were doing it, it was one of them. But he was the guy, I was still really young, 20 years old. But he was the guy that actually got me to understand there are historic things and they are done. And guess what? You're one of the guys doing them. It doesn't make you special. Doesn't make you, all it makes you is one of the guys doing them. But you have to accept that. So in accepting that, you get a mindset that you belong up there doing that stuff. And it takes a lot of the kind of, if you're going to be wobbly about things because you're undecided about where you fit in things, we knew perfectly well, or believed anyway, that as far as that kind of climbing, nobody was better than us at that time. Whether it was true or not, it was close to being true.
What earlier you talked about a couple different types of climbing. You said that you were a real good crack climber. People who listen to this podcast, right? This isn't like a climbing specific podcast, right? What does it mean to be a crack climber?
Most climbs are like a certain climb that goes up a certain formation, right? Say there's 10 ways to go up a formation. You have El Capitan, there's 10 different ways from the west face to the west buttress to the south A wall to the nose to the NA wall, to Zodiac, yada, yada, east buttress. So there are all these different ways to go up. And most ways are called routes, okay? But most routes are earmarked by a particular, by features on the wall. You don't climb a featureless wall, right? You have to have a route, and a route is usually signified by cracks. There's a crack that starts over here, and you pick one up over here, and there's over here, and you connect these different cracks, and that's your route. And they come in a million different varieties, in corners and splitters, in the middle of a blank face, behind flakes. There's all kinds of different ways you can come across a crack. But there's also face climbing, which is not crack climbing. You're using natural, like hand and foot holes in the face, or jugs, or dikes that stick out, or intrusions of different kinds of rock that you can climb on. So there's a whole bunch of different ways or features that you can follow that signify a route that goes up a given cliff, right? Mm-hmm. As I said, most of those, or a lot of those, tend to follow crack systems, and I'm a little bit big for thin crack stuff. I just way too much, and my hands are too big and all that.
Yeah, because we were climbing the other day, and you were, I think we might even have it on video. You were like, I cannot get my fingers in this crack.
My hands are too, I have to do this crazy like 5'11" move to stretch past this section. My fingers aren't going to go in it, you know? And that's like a 5'9", 5'10" route.
Yeah.
But even one of the interesting things about it, I totally forgot about this, is we had a bunch of friends in Camp 4, right? Yeah. Where the climbers campground, and we told everybody, hey, we're doing this thing tomorrow. Go down to El Cap Meadow and honk horns and stuff, because we might start getting tired to the top, so we need some moral support, right? Mm-hmm. We had all of our friends down the meadow, making racket, drinking, honking horns. So, we do a pitch and everybody honked their horn and what have you. It was sort of a family affair, the first one day of sending the nose. And when we got down, we went to the bar and everybody was there, and we just had it was crazy. So it was
big old party.
Yeah, it was a Camp 4 kind of group function, and we just happened to be the designated, like the stunt dummies.
Were people like, yeah, of course they did it? Or was anybody surprised? What was the reaction around Camp 4?
Everybody was totally surprised, other than the top climbers, because we knew that was totally doable.
And about who were the top climbers?
There's a dozen people there in Yosemite, that a couple of foreigners that went to Yosemite enough to be able to catch on to the methods needed to climb there. So it's a little bit different climbing there than in Yosemite than anywhere else.
Did you get a lot of people, or a lot of elite climbers, repeating that single day ascent?
Yeah, afterwards it became a thing. So
how long was it until the next, party did it?
Next year. The following year,
That's still a long time.
not that long.
What do you mean?
The top, look, once it's like breaking the mile, the 4-minute thing on the mile.
Yeah.
Once somebody did it, a whole bunch of people started doing it. It's a mental thing more than anything. And once El Cap had been climbing a day, by 1985, it became almost something you had to do if you considered yourself a top flight climber, was to just go up there and prove how efficient you could be,
Right.
and being able to just blast this thing off.
Right.
Here's the most famous climber in the world. Have at it, dude.
When, I guess pretty much the next major thing to happen, or one of the next major things to happen, would be the first single day free ascent of the nose.
Yeah.
Or I guess I guess not by definition, but the first free ascent of the nose, it happened in a single day. I guess that's adding superlatives.
Yeah, Lynn
right?
Hill.
Tell me about that.
Lynn Hill, we were like a boyfriend and girlfriend for quite a while when I was really young, when she was really young. We were like early 20s. And by the time I got, like I was 26 or so, I wanted to do other things. I've been going to Yosemite 8 years in a row, spending every summer day there. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to go to other places and do other adventures and do the more writing thing and all of that. So I went into that. Lynn moved to New York and started doing the sport climbing thing. But I always knew, because I climbed with her a bunch, that she was a generational talent. Mm-hmm. And she came, I guess I saw her, Lynn, at a trade show or something. And it just dawned on me, hey, Lynn, you, I think, are good enough to go and free climb the nose. You ought to think about trying that, right? And she goes, really? Yeah. And so, long story short, she did do that. But it took her a bunch of different tries and what have you. And then she finally did it. And then it became the thing, that the trick was, can I free climb that entire thing in a day? So she trained all year with that in mind and went back and did it. And that was a monumental kind of achievement, like one for the ages. Ours was the first one-day ascent was a breakthrough, a mental breakthrough, and a solid like athletic performance. What she did redid the sport.
Can you think of a handy analogy?
Michael Jordan. Yeah. It was that performance was, when he was dominant in the NBA, everybody knew it was Michael Jordan, right?
Yeah.
He's the guy. Well, when Lynn came along and did that, I thought it was great, because it wasn't a guy, it was her.
Yeah.
The gap between male and female performance in climbing is way less than it is in most other sports, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Like the top female climbers are climbing a tick below the top guys.
Right.
Right? I mean, and in the case of Lynn, that was, no guy had ever achieved that level of difficulty on that scale ever. Mm. Nobody had ever done anything remote. Actually, I mean, I think it's pretty fair to say that was a completely trend-setting thing. Wouldn't you say that, Ken?
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, when Lynn free climbed the nose?
And internationally, too. It wasn't just amongst our group or Yosemite. It was around the world.
Yeah, that was, I would say, one of the high water marks of world rock climbing history, for sure. Mm. And it's high enough to where it's very rare anybody even does that climb today. It's 31 years later, man.
Do you know how long it was until that got repeated?
Repeated it the year after in a day. So she did it twice first, and then it would have been Tommy.
Yeah, that's like 2002.
Yeah.
Really?
More than a dozen years afterwards, I think.
Wow.
Really?
Yeah, oh yeah.
It wasn't repeated until Tommy and Beth?
Yeah, that was the second ascent.
Wow.
Shoes are right over there in the corner.
Okay. Well, you're about to hear a word from our sponsors. You're about to see some B-roll, and when we get back, we're going to talk about probably the El Capitan that most people are familiar with, that being Alex Honnold's free solo. Stick around. Hey guys, this is Ad Hayden coming to you, or I guess semi-Ad Hayden. We had a whole bunch of ad copy written up, but I don't think I need it for this product. I just want to tell you about something that I like genuinely. That's sharedpour.com. Sharedpour.com is the place to go, in my humble opinion, if you're looking for hard-to-find bourbons, allocated whiskeys. I know that those two are sometimes the same thing. Or just spirits in general. I've been using them since way before we even considered being partners with him. Actually, since before, Andrew, I think, when did we start recording episodes for this? Yeah, like since before we recorded the first episode of Backcountry Manifesto. And here, look, here's the receipts to prove it. You see this bottle of Mammoth from our bourbon? That's a single barrel select right there. Now check this out. Here, wait, you can hear it too if you're listening. Right, is that gonna be in frame, Andrew? Okay, well right here, I don't know. There's my receipt from March of 2024. I really do use these people. I believe in like them as a company. They're great folks. Now, if you're 21 or older, that is very important. If you're a minor, pay no attention to this advertisement. And you live in the United States, sharedpour.com will ship liquor straight to your doorstep. You'll need a signature, but they'll do it with flat rate shipping, which is really helpful if you're ordering a couple bottles. That way you don't pay out the nose through shipping. You could order like 10, 15 bottles. I don't know, maybe Craig, don't get mad at me. And they will ship for the same price as one. The other thing is that they're customer service experts. If you call them, should you have a problem with your order, and you won't, you will get a person who actually works there answering the phone and making the issue right. They have the best selection, whether it's a single barrel pick, again, a hard to find allocated bourbon, or even your daily sipper. You should check out sharedpour.com. And right now, and that is ad speak, you can use code BACKCOUNTRY, okay? That's Backcountry, all one word, all caps. I think that's important. That's what they were texting me and telling me was important. You will get 10% off your entire purchase at sharedpour.com. Go check them out. You'll like them as much as I do. You'll get a bunch of cool whiskey. You'll impress your friends. You'll annoy your spouse. And you'll have some great spirits. Backcountry for 10% off your order at sharedpour.com. So, as promised, new location?
Yeah. Yeah, you know, you can sort of understand why climbing El Cap is a big deal when you're here. Because you can't help but look up there and go, that's just not something that we were meant to do, really. You know, it's some kind of victory going against our genetics, right? It's like, don't forget about going up there. That's to look at. You don't belong up on that thing.
Have you ever been like, have you ever been like afraid of heights?
Well, everybody has an inherent, at least a solid respect for them, right?
I'm talking about like.
Terrified of them?
I'm talking about like getting somewhere and being like, oh no, yeah.
No.
Really? Like, what about like as a kid?
No, I found myself very frightened at times up on a big wall, but you sort of go with it and you can recover from those moments. I never got fixed into it, like a state where I was, I'm just terrified forever of this thing. And then, it's another thing, you get acclimatized to it. Like when I first came here, I could hardly look at that thing. I was 16. I could hardly. I knew people that climbed it. I wanted to climb it, but I didn't want to look at it because I was going to do some other time. And then over a period of time, you just sort of got used to looking at it, then climbing at the base, and then do the east buttress and the west face, and then finally, 2 years later, do something up like the first ascent, my first time up the nose. And by that time, I was used to I could handle the climbing. It was a matter of the scale. That's the whole thing about a lot of what climbing Yosemite is about, is handling that kind of magnitude. Because look, shoot, man. As many times as I've been here, it always amazes me to look at that thing.
It's wild, man. Earlier we were talking about this being my first time here. And dude, I was ready for it to be a big thing. I was ready, a pyramids moment, an Eiffel Tower moment, a Great Wall of China moment. I know that those are man-made things, but
yeah.
We're talking about things that generally inspire some sort of sense of wonder. I was not prepared.
Yeah.
For all of seeing it and thought about it and talked with you about it.
That's a different thing to see it in person. The other thing is you were able to hike we hiked all the way to the base of the thing and did some climbing on it. And it's hard to explain the visceral basal, basic kind of shock of being at the base of the thing and looking up and having something that big right in your face like that, right? It's just so right there, and it, 3 times as big as the biggest skyscraper you can ever imagine or see, and there it is. And, no wonder when the first outsiders rode in here on horseback in the 1800s, they thought a planet had cratered into the earth, and that was it, like a little mini planet or something, or a giant meteorite, or it wasn't how could that thing be there, right?
Literally otherworldly.
Yeah, it came from some other outer space. It flew down and stuck in the earth like a dart.
It is so dumb. It is dumb how big that thing is.
Yeah, and to think we're still a couple miles away from it. That's it. Whoo!
It's...
Hey, you know how many stories there are of people that came here from the 4 corners of the world, climbers, to climb the thing, and got here and just drove home?
We teased it a handful of times, or not a handful of times, but right before we left the museum, we were talking about Alex Honnold free soloing it, or we said that we were going to. What do you think about that, man? What are your thoughts?
It's an amazing accomplishment, but what people don't see is what goes into him being able to do that.
Well, contextualize, anybody who's seen
a guy
free
that grew
solo.
up in a climbing gym, was addicted to climbing from the time he was 8 years old. Yeah. That was his thing. That was his life.
Yeah.
And then he had that certain kind of head that didn't get scared, genetics or whatever, right? Didn't get scared on stuff, and he loved to climb without a rope, and he worked his way up the ladder until he did increasingly more and more difficult things, and then got on the big stone in the early 2000s and spent a solid 12 years getting used to climbing all over it. And the route in particular that he climbed without a rope, he'd done dozens of times and probably climbed the harder parts, if not 50, 100 times, right? So you're not talking about somebody who's up there with no familiarity about it. No one knew that route better than he did on Earth. And given who he was, how good he is, the head he has, and the ambition that he had, it made sense for him to do it. Was it still a mind-blowing accomplishment? Absolutely. Because just the sheer idea of audacity of being up there with no rope is just,
It's insane.
It's
almost
borderline
insane.
crazy, yeah.
Did you ever think you'd see somebody do that?
I hadn't really thought about anybody doing it because it felt so outrageous. When I left the valley as a full-time participant,
Sure.
trying to be the world's greatest rock climber, there's a bunch of us trying to do that, right? And when I left, the main face of the thing has still not even been free climbed. that was still 8 or 10 years off, right?
Yeah.
We've done the west face, but that's not really the main face. And so it was beyond, our ability to even imagine doing something like that. So yeah, it was a mind-blowing kind of accomplishment. Like if people in other sports knew how outrageous it was, they would give them a moment's pause for sure.
Well, I think people did give him a moment's pause. I mean, I think that they knew that it was outrageous. I just don't think they knew, and I think Tommy Caldwell says something to the same extent. It's yeah, anybody can see it and be it's outrageous, but for the people who know, it is just
beyond the pale,
100 times more
Yeah.
outrageous.
Yeah, because it's so even as good as Alice is, it's right there on the, it only takes a little bit of a flub, and you're taking a fall for the ages, and you'll never recover. There's no chance in the world. You're dead.
Oh,
But it's from way up there.
yeah.
So just that's such a horrifying thought, that plummet. Yeah, my hat's off to him, man. I hope he doesn't try it again.
Yeah, I don't think. Well, I mean, I don't know if he will or not. It would be very surprising to me if he did.
Not much point in doing it. If you've done it once, that's why try. Yeah, that's a push your luck kind of thing.
It's 50 years to the day. What do you think about that?
I mean, you can't. What do you say? I mean, it's amazing in one sense, but on the other sense, or in the other sense, the interesting thing about being a human or being alive is that your conscious sense of being me here is always the same. If you look back when you're 12 or 20 or 25 or whatever, your sense of being you, it always had the same feel to it.
Yeah.
So my sense of being me is the same now as it was 50 years ago.
Yeah.
Right? There's a lot of history that's come down in between, but I'm still me and I'm still here. And so the time thing is sort of a concept.
Yeah.
But as a concept, that's the only way I can really get my head around it, right? As a concept, it seems impossible that it's been 50 years because I still feel like a kid. So, but everything about doing that thing in a day seemed like a long shot. A no name. I was a nobody. It came from nowhere in particular. And the fact that I ever ended up here climbing with world-class people on a historic thing like that and making history on that, it as a concept, it seems impossible, right? But as a lived experience, I was good at climbing. I knew those guys. Those were my buddies, and that's the natural thing to do. And guess what? We did it. And that, that's how that stuff happens. It isn't. Only reason it happens is because the people that do those kind of things, and I was in on this particular one, it feels like, okay, this is something that's natural for me to do, and I'm going to try it, and we'll see what goes, or what happens. And, it happened. But that's a lot of times how the historical things happen, is they're not, at the time, it doesn't seem while you're doing it like some earth-shattering thing. It's just hard work and whatever. It's just sort of another thing that you do.
Well,
because you can do it.
Now that time has passed, how does it feel?
I didn't ever think that climbing would get as big as it was, or that an event like that would garner such a reputation, or the photo of it would be so iconic that everybody that climbs El Cap comes down here and tries to replicate standing in front of El Cap like we did,
right.
As a sort of joke thing with funny clothes on.
Yeah.
If you ask most people that have done historical things what they thought about it at the time, it wouldn't have seemed like what it later is made out to be.
Sure, but what about now?
Seems like
you've had some time to think about
or a
it.
dream, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I feel lucky and fortunate and, all of that stuff to have had a part in something that will mean something going forward. When long after I'm gone, I will have my name attached to that thing up there. And that's sort of cool to think about.
That is pretty cool
Yeah.
to think about. When you say a hallucination or a dream, what do you mean? Is it just hard to believe that it was you?
No, I never questioned that, in all the climbing I never questioned that I had a skill set that was applicable to that particular kind of thing, right? But what the hallucination is not. I can still look up there and feel the same thing I felt 50 years ago, which was, God damn, that thing's big, and it's impressive, and you're never going to master something like that. The most you can do is go up there and survive it and have some great memories. And it's still just as crazy. We just were over here talking to people that just got off. That thing has a carryover. You're high after doing that thing for days. And you saw the look in those people's eyes that just got off the thing yesterday. It has a magnetic pull, and as soon as they got off it, they find themselves back just staring at it going, huh? Because you can never really get your head over the fact that that was your experience up there. It's a different kind of thing. And that's to answer your question, what do you mean by hallucination? It's something your rational mind can never quite get a hold of. Even though while your body and your awareness is actually doing it and it's happening and you're having the experience, it still feels slightly unreal because it's so outlandish.
Those dudes look like some tough dudes too.
Yeah.
Those guys look burly.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can tell, that kind of trap steel mindset that's you're going to get up there and they're going to do it too, right?
Yeah.
And you're going to get in for some, really exhilarating moments being up there, especially on the route they did.
Yeah, they did the shield.
Yeah, which is questionably the most exposed position on all El Cap. I remember being up there doing that, dropping a piton and counting off. As soon as I dropped it, it's like, oh shit. And I started counting 1, 2, 1,003. And I got to like 18 or something before I heard the clink. So it's free falling for like 20 seconds. Like not hitting anything, dropping right through the air. Excuse me. Dropping right through the air. And yeah, that's a really steep place to be up there, man. Yeah. You can't, I guess what I'm saying, you can't totally appreciate your surroundings or your position or what you're doing or whatever. In retrospect, yeah, you can get your head around it a little bit, but the experience is too oceanic to try to, and it's too much of an outlier from the other things in your life. Hanging on the side of El Cap compared to grocery shopping or arguing with your spouse it seems like completely different things, right? And I guess you could say the same about war and, drag racing and NBA finals and all those things have a feel of being great, bigger. You're involved in something bigger than yourself.
Or maybe even something bigger than you can kind of perceive all at once. Like even when you're climbing something like that, right? Like at most you're in a 20-yard square that you can see in your periphery.
Yeah, I can work with that, right?
Yeah.
Nobody climbs that whole thing all at once. That's another thing. You climb it in 10-foot sections. If you looked up and go, I can't get my head around climbing this whole thing, but I can do this next 20 feet. I know I can do that.
Yeah.
And then you can do the next 20. And then you do the next 20. So you actually climb El Cap in a series of 10 to 20-foot bits.
Yeah.
Then you can get your head around it, right? But trying to get your head around the whole thing is, I don't know if it's doable that way, right? But, as I was saying, you have a lot of history behind you. And as I said, when we're driving here, and that we're really, all of us are climbing on one rope. It's just a bunch of people over time. And the people behind me are behind me on the rope, and now I'm leading for a bit. And in a while, somebody will be in front of me, and somebody will be in front of them. But we're all connected, right? In reference to the things we do, and experientially, being up there is the same when I was up there in '75 as it is right now, and as it was in 1957 or '8 when Harding was first up there. And it'll be the same experientially for the next team. For the next century and the next century after that, it's still the one rope because the experience is basically the same. Being up there as a human being and looking around and smelling and sensing and feeling and thinking and feeling, all of it, it's all going to be, the baseline experience is all going to be the same. even no matter how much technically better somebody gets, being up there in its barest form, still the same. And it's a rush, man.
I think in one of our earlier podcasts, you had mentioned, we were talking about like the ethics of free soloing and just like doing dangerous shit in general. And we were talking about it in like the realm of selfishness. And you had said something to the extent of like, you know, people say that, oh, you know, this doesn't really matter. It's an ego trip. But at the same time, like, yeah, it sort of does.
No, it does. And there are two reasons, right?
Uh-huh.
And both of them have to do with the external world and the individual that's involved in it, all right? In terms of the external world, when you see a fantastic performance, no matter what it is, right? And especially if it's improbable or you know, sort of record setting or whatever, any of those things, those can be inspirational moments for other people that might find themselves in a difficult spot, and they can recognize in the efforts or the accomplishments of others what other people have done, and recognize I'm a person, that person did that, I can get out of bed. I can go to work, I can do these things no matter how I feel. I know we are capable of doing these kinds of things. And so anybody pushing the limits on things that are basically sort of trying to find out what human limits are, those are all victories for everybody in a sense, right? That's one thing. And the second thing is doing these kinds of things shows people what your life might look like if it wasn't dominated by fear, which is generally speaking the catching or the sticking point for everybody doing anything difficult, right?
Yeah.
You're afraid of it. You're afraid of the results, or afraid of the outcome, or you know, whatever it may be. What if the fear factor wasn't there in the sense that it normally is? And you look at this kind of stuff and you realize that's what that looks like. That's not to say, or another way to look at that is, I'm not saying that people up there are not frightened, but they can still operate. And that's what that looks like, working with the fear or whatever. You're not just grounded by it. So in that sense, yeah, they're selfish, but they can motivate people that are down to try to push themselves in, you know, whatever necessary way it is. And two, well, what does life look like without fear? How many things can you do, or who could you be if you weren't dominated by fear? If you just took it out of the equation for the moment, or you learned that making it a non-factor, no matter how big it is doable. Those are great things to be able to do, right?
Well, yeah, and you were certainly a go-getter after you left the valley in what, 78 or something?
Yeah. The shield was it. That was the last thing I did.
Really?
Yeah.
Do you think that, say you did all the climbing that you'd done, but you just weren't of the generation that did El Cap in that particular way, do you think you'd be like the same John Long?
You know what it is everybody comes in the world wondering whether they're worthy of whatever, right? And that later historically became such a big deal that I never in a million years would have thought it would have been, like a benchmark kind of thing for adventure sports and what have you. I didn't see that coming at all. And when that did happen, I could still feel insecure and, you know, unworthy and all the rest of it, but not for long if I looked at that particular thing.
You were like, hey man,
I'm
a guy that does not only things, but the thing.
Yeah, and it doesn't make me any better, but it doesn't make me less than, right? So the less than that runs in everybody's vein. I got sort of a get out of jail card on that as a go-to place. If I got sideways with myself, all I needed to do was think about doing El Capitan a day, and like, okay, if I can do that, I can figure this out. And so in that respect, yeah, I don't think, that gave me something in life that I wasn't going to get doing anything else, because that's what I could do. And I couldn't do, there's a lot of other things that would have probably done the same, but I couldn't do them or didn't do them. So yeah, it was a great confidence builder.
True.
Does that answer it, you think?
Yeah, no, I think it does. And that's, it's always interesting. What's interesting about it, in a way that, like a lot of people climb Everest, right? I would, many more people climb Everest than climb El Cap. For sure. I mean, it's got to be true.
I don't think so.
How wouldn't that? How don't you think?
Because I don't know what the numbers are, but there's a lot of people climbing El Cap these days. I mean, when I say a lot, at any given time you can find 6 to 8 parties up there during the prime months. I guess that isn't a whole lot.
Yeah, Everest has like 1,000 summit seasons sometimes.
Yeah, you may be right. I don't know what the numbers are.
Yeah. Well, I may be right, I may be wrong, but it seems that
it's a different thing. You can't Everest. You can go as a super fit person with great cardio, that's young and fit, and you can get on the right team, and you don't have to be technical at all, and you can slog to the top of it if everything goes right. You're not doing that up here. You got to do a lot of training and have a certain kind of head, and be ambitious and not prone to freaking out, and be willing to stay up, spend some time up there and suffer and get starve and be thirsty and all. There's a lot of things you need to be able to do.
If you had to summate El Cap in the context of the life of John Long, what are give me one sentence.
I think of El Cap as a knee plus ultra of natural magnitude. As far as an example of nature in its powerful twin bicep pose, that's it. Right there. Okay?
Yeah.
Mighty El Cap, man. Look at that sucker.
I mean, there's really nothing in the whole world like it.
No,
man.
there isn't. It's a one of a kind, and everybody that comes here from whatever land knows it the moment they see it. Nothing's that steep, that smooth, with wet. Look at this weather, man. You talk we're out here in t-shirts. Most of the places that have cliffs that are like this are above 10,000 feet, and they're all snowbound. You're freezing your ass off. This is user-friendly in a sense, weather-wise and day-wise, and how handy it is. And then you get up there and you realize, this is the business, man. But that's the weird part about it. There's so much that make it available to you to go and try it, and then you get up there and you're like, wow. I got suckered into being up here and thinking that, it's sunny Southern California, and man, this thing is steep. And it goes for a while. It isn't over. I think one of the most interesting things about being up on El Cap, even if you do it in a day, and I did it a bunch of times in a day, well, not a bunch, but a handful of times in a day.
More than most.
Yeah. But anyway, the thing is that it forces you to be present. You're not going to be mind wandering or somewhere else or thinking about, you're right there with it for an extended period of time. And most people never have an experience like that, where they're intensely focused on being right there, right then for hours, maybe a whole day, maybe 2 days, right? And that clears your head in ways otherwise impossible. When you get, all the mystical traditions will tell you it's all about being present, right? But modern distractions and the way our brain works, we start talking to ourselves and yada, yada, and you can just drift off in all kinds of different places. You're very rarely here right now, and that thing will make you be present. And that's a lot of wanting to be up there, is having that experience. You know, it really does, it's settling in ways that you appreciate for the rest of your life.
How often do you think about Jim Bridwell and Billy Westbay?
Yeah, those are guys I was fortunate to meet them, and I think about them quite often, actually. Yeah, they're soulmates of mine, and I did a whole bunch of good stuff. I'm looking right at another route I did with Billy and Jim right over there, Central Pillar Frenzy. You know, so a lot of landmark things. I walked across Borneo with Bridwell. You know, I rappelled down Angel Falls in Venezuela jungle, the largest, biggest waterfall in the world, on a television show with Bridwell. I almost died in a helicopter crash. I mean, the crazy experiences I've had in life, a lot of them were with Bridwell, and more than a few were with Westbay. And so, you know, yeah, they come up in my consciousness a lot, and those were people that, you know, we put our lives in each other's hands, and it worked out for us. So I got a lot to be grateful for, in knowing those people and having, you know, sharing their experiences, because they were exceptional guys, both of them. Really were, you know, one generational talent. And I never thought of myself in that regard, but somehow or another I ended up on things, you know, with them. And they were both, man, they were off the charts how good they were. And ambitious too, and fearless. So yeah, they've been a real inspiration to me at the time, and then ever since. You know, it's very saddening that I lost both of them since we were originally here 50 years ago, but you know, that's how it goes. It's all impermanent. You have to deal with that.
Do you ever think about that, being the last person around from that photo?
Yeah, I do.
What do you think about it? I mean, you know.
Yes, I don't know, man.
I don't want to do like the emotional gotcha thing, but I'm curious, you know.
I mean, the most you can do with that is just to sit with it. You know, I could just be with the fact, okay, where are my bros, right? I mean, you can't answer that question from this position. I'm here and they're not, and it's you know, I feel a loss for sure. But I think El Cap remembers, and I think it remembers me, and is looking down now, right, going, people come and go, but I go on forever. That's the kind of thing. And you're sort of looking at eternity in a sense, you know, so. Yeah, there's something about being down here looking up at that thing that's reassuring that it'll still be here years from now, and there'll still be people like you and me coming down here getting a rush out of it, right? I mean, it's a little bit like the Hajj and Mecca, you know, for the Arabs going to Mecca. I mean, this is as close to a natural shrine as we can sort of have. Never gets tiring looking at it, does it?
No.
Right?
No, it's like
there's like a force field coming off. It's like, woo!
We're losing light. I'm gonna make you go take me bouldering in Camp 4. What do you think?
I think you're gonna fall on your ass.
Let's go. Roll credits. Everybody, thanks for watching this episode of the Backcountry Manifesto podcast. If you want more Backcountry Manifesto, go ahead and check out one of these links right here. And make sure to share the podcast with your friends, comment, like, subscribe, do all that good stuff. It really helps us out. Again, thank you very much for watching. Now go check out one of these things. I like this one. This one was a good episode, I promise.